We, first semester, first year, one of our classmates, Ray Lipscomb, had a pet squirrel that
Yeah.
was named Gizmo that he kept in a shoebox in his closet. Second semester, first year, I break up with my girlfriend like 6 weeks before graduation. So now I've got no one to take to graduation dance, lips in the soup. And I'm at the mall with Joe Martin just wasting a Sunday. And we pass a pet store and I'm like, I'm buying a dog.
Right.
So I did some thinking,
Just
right?
why not?
I thought to myself, well, as an officer, I can't have a big dog because I'm going to be out. So I need a small dog. So I got a little Lhasa Apso puppy who was just a little ball of fur at the time. And I brought him back. What am I going to do with him? And so we kept him in our room for the last 6 weeks of school.
Really?
Yeah. And when I went to class, he would go into the laundry bag.
Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is Christopher Bump, column number 42996. We'll hear about Chris's use of a deuce and a half as a getaway car and his smart move of violating the don't date the roommate rule. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any organization, most particularly Thermo Fisher Scientific. Chris Bump, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
These are my favorite because we did not know each other at the academy and just haven't had a chance to run into each other. So we have a chance now to catch up, get to know each other, and start a bit from scratch. So these are the ones that I really enjoy.
A bit, yes. There was one cross path. You may recall it because I got an email back from you, but I'm going to say back in 2019, I took on the challenge of drinking only water for a year.
Right.
You
did.
I did. And I completed that in April of 2020 and celebrated with a double bourbon. But when I announced it on the class page, I got a response from you. I'm quite pleased about this, and I was like, cool.
Which is how I celebrated the end of my year of water, was with a really nice glass of highly rated wine. So, absolutely right. That's excellent. Now we're starting this from a slightly different end. What is it about Bravo 4, the B4 Buffaloes? You guys have an amazing crew. Talk about that group. What is it about you guys?
Well, okay, yeah. So I guess what I would say first is, our class is amazing, right? I mean, it's crazy when I tell people how many people from our class how many people esteem from our class. And it's not just the politicians or the generals, right? It's the Joey DePinos and the Steve Cannons, and all these people who have gone on to amazing, great things. So B4, we were a very irreverent group, right? When you were in C4, B4 was a Hayes company.
Yep.
By the time we were firsties, we were the complete opposite. Every firstie in the company was a ghost. We pretty much were all just kind of doing our own thing. We had 10 prepsters in the class of 86 in B4.
Okay.
Right. So there was a familiarity, obviously.
Yeah, right, right.
And, I think 180 prepsters came up back when we came up that June of 82.
So you had 10 of you, so you knew each other from the prep school.
To a degree. I mean, it was a familiarity, right? So, but that Buckner year that Buckner summer was really a bonding experience for us. And again, I go back, Captain Bingham, who I know was our TAC at Buckner, and he tried very hard to be strict, and for whatever reason, it was an irreverent group.
Right.
We did, as an example, I was the supply sergeant for 7th Company, and we thought the best thing we should do one summer night was go steal a guidon from Lake Frederick. This was tradition, right?
And if you were to list out all the things you could do, that was number one.
Right. So, but we started doing the logistics and realized, we got to be there when it's dark, and we still have to get back by taps. There's no way.
Right.
And so I said, well, I'm supply sergeant. I've got a deuce and a half. We can use that. So we took the deuce and a half and we loaded up with a bunch of us and we drove up to Lake Frederick and we reversed the truck on the reverse side of the hill so no one could see us. And that way, when we stole the guy down, we could come running and jump in and race down the hill back to Buckner. And long story short, we were discovered. We were discovered by a car coming up on the reverse side of the hill. And somewhere in the path, the car said to himself, why is there a deuce and a half parked on the side of the
That looks like a getaway car.
That's right. It was a getaway car. All the classmates were hiding in the wood line right there. And the car does a 3-point turn and turns around. And when he does, Rich Hatch, who was the driver, he said, we're out of here. He sits up, turns on the engine and goes. And the guys in the woods, some of them panicked. And they came running out of the woods, diving into the deuce and a half. And, of course, the car sees all that. And now he knows something's afoot. And
that right there gave it up.
Yeah. So he chased us down the hill, right? At the very bottom of the hill, he pulled us over and took our information and sent us to the CQ at Buckner and reported us,
And who was the driver of the car? The firstie?
Well, that's part of the funny story. Yeah. The driver of the car was a gentleman named Major Edwards, who turned out to be the tactical officer of B4 when I arrived.
It is a small world, isn't it, Chris?
Now, Major Edwards was he was the officer in charge of Lake Frederick that night. Mm-hmm. And Major Edwards had been told under no circumstances could he go home and have dinner with his wife, which obviously he had done. It did not occur to him that by writing us up and turning us in, Colonel Sloan would say, well, Major Edwards, what were you doing on the backside of that hill, at 9 o'clock at night? Mm-hmm. So he got reprimanded and held myself and Rich Hatch in particular accountable for that.
Right.
But anyhow, so these kinds of things, these kinds of irreverence, built a lot of camaraderie. During COVID, Danny Schaefer, who's kind of our class networking guy. I mean, everywhere he goes, he's going to call somebody and network, right? And so he has this idea about doing Zoom calls, and we started out very small. He, myself, Joe Martin, John Bacot, and then one day we're doing it, and Joe Martin brings Kurt Gutierrez on. And Kurt's like, wow, this is amazing. I've never seen anything like this. You guys are all in the same company? And that was kind of like, that's pretty cool. And it grew. So now there's a very large company-wide text group for the Class 86. And like you said, we have reunions and things like, the last Army Navy was up in New England, and Tom McCann has a house in Rhode Island, so that was the base operations, things like that.
Well, I'll take a minute to call out Dan Schaefer. He's actually like a spiritual inspiration for this podcast, because he showed up in Denver out of the blue and reached out to me, and he put a group of 5 of us together, and we were all kind of embarrassed because we all lived in Denver, but Dan is the one who brought us together, and we had such a good time that night. And this was a couple of years ago, before I really made a lot of effort with the academy and classmates. It really inspired me. So Dan's a special guy, and it's great that he did that for you guys.
Yeah. So I mean, that's it. Just part of the part of the B4 thing. And Danny and I have been very close for a very long time. I love to give him grief. I was best man at his wedding, and one of the stories I told is how before Buckner, we're all standing in Central area getting ready to go, not knowing anybody, and this little tiny short guy taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, you want to be bunkmates? Yeah, sure. And that was the beginning of my friendship with Danny Schaefer.
Yeah. What a great way to begin, right? Just that one little, hey, you want to do it? That's great. And so, what the plebe company? Talk about being a plebe. We'll work backward a little bit.
Yep. So I was a plebe in E1.
Okay.
And E1's another one of those companies, right? I look at the guys who came out of there, Steve Cannon and Mark Green and Terrence Green and Brock Perkuchin. I mean, it was just like stacked with these people who've gone on to big things, or they named themselves within the Corps or within the our class,
right?
And it was our year, the plebes, who invented the E1 Dammit.
Is that right?
The company took on. It was Jeff Thompson came up with that idea, I believe it was. And the upperclassmen liked it enough that kind of became the
For
thing.
any armchair historians out there who want to do a PhD on where E1 Damon came from, we have found the source. This is the source material, as they say.
Plebe year was first reg, obviously, and E1 was like the rest of them. They were strict. But I was very, very fortunate in that my first semester, my squad leader was a guy named Mike Duvall, who was from the Air Force Academy. And he found the way that things were done so unorthodox that he in our squad he created a 4C competition who could bring him the most 4Cs. Now, this was the seed of irreverence that kind of stuck in me, from that point on. That was
how ingeniously subversive for an Air Force Academy cadet to do that.
Yeah. I remember Terrence Green once stuck his paw out, after the upperclassmen went up and down the line, just absolutely chewing us out. And for whatever reason, I think it's still true today, I could not hold my head up straight. I'm always kind of like, standing in attention like this. And they're just absolutely, tearing us apart. And Terrence Green stuck his paw out, just heard him ask a question. He asked Cadet Duvall, why does the Academy allow them to do that to us? And he thought for a second, and he said, well, at the very least, you'll get to decide what kind of leader you're going to be. Now, this is back in fall of '82, right?
Yeah, right.
That line stuck with me. I mean, that has stayed with me ever since.
And do you know what he ended up going on to do? Because he sounds like a guy that had his head on straight there.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah,
obviously the Air Force, but I don't know.
Yeah. What a bit of wisdom in the midst of a bunch of nonsense. Yeah. So that whole part of first reg was kind of a thing, right? So
Yep.
in the battalion that you ended up in had tried to be that for many years. I think it started with the class of '82. They tried to make the Wild West Battalion a first reg kind of environment, but you came in on the tail end of that, obviously.
I did, and I think everything had to do with the new tactical officer. We got a new tactical officer beginning of my Cal year. He was an aviation type, and the culture changed completely. We definitely went whole hog into that. So, and then one of our classmates in the company was Wade Yost, right? And he was very close with Terry Boylan, who I think was an A4.
Uh-huh.
And he had grown up on the same posts as General Boylan, so he knew Boop, as we referred to him, well. And of course, General Boylan's son, Pete Boylan, was in our company as well. And so when General Boylan would come over and inspect B4 and be a terror, at the end, everyone knew it was going to be okay, right? Because both Boop, his son, and Wade were like, "Don't worry about it," So
yeah.
Again, if there's no real repercussions, the irreverence starts to flourish.
So I'm going to take us off track a little bit, but there's a living history project for General Boylan's class, and he's interviewed for multiple hours. And he actually, in this 2-hour interview talking about his entire career, he talks about those inspections, about how he would go do that because he felt like it was a version of being out on the line with the troops. But he'd go in the middle of the day, and
middle of the day. That's exactly right.
He talks specifically about that. So not many of us had the get out of jail free card, though. So.
I remember very thing as Cal year. He comes in. He's inspecting my room. And he picks up my low quarters, and of course, there's holes in the bottom. And so he fires them across the room. Yeah. And I just looked at Selbs. Kent Selby, our company commander. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then he stormed out and we got back to life.
Yeah. I served with Terry in the 24. She's a consummate professional and a good friend.
Yes.
She was MIL. Yeah. Good stuff. So let's go back a bit now. Have I seen you on a gaming forums? Is that right, on Facebook? Have I seen you pop up on some things like that, or is that?
You may have, yeah.
Now, is that
this goes way back?
You were younger,
right?
Did that get you interested in the military?
Yeah. So my father was in the Air Force. He was a fighter pilot. He was the embodiment of the great Santini, right? All he cared about was flying, and the only way my brother and I could get his attention or approval was what we referred to as the three S's. So it was either sports, school, or scouting. These are the three things that mattered to him.
Right, right.
So both of us went on to become Eagle Scouts. Both of us played sports year-round, multiple sports sometimes, and it was a constant pressure to do well in school. And when I was 12 years old, we were moving. We were being permanent change of station, so PCS, from Tampa to Las Vegas, where he was going to learn a new platform. He's going from the F4 to the F-111. And on that trip, in order to save money, we only camped. Everywhere we went, we stayed in KOAs and things like that. We didn't stay in hotels. But we went way out of our way. We drove from Tampa straight up to Maryland, and we went and saw the midshipman at Navy.
Okay.
And this is good, And from there, we went and saw the pages in Congress, and this is good. And then from there, we went and saw the cadets at West Point, And,
you did? Okay.
Yeah, this is good. And then from West Point, we drove. We didn't stop anywhere else. We didn't stop at the Grand Canyon. We didn't stop at the Arch of St. Louis. We didn't stop anywhere else until we got to the Air Force Academy. And this is good.
Now, did he have a line of thinking there, or was it just he was interested in it? Or
I can't help but wonder if he'd read a book on psychology. How do you get my kids to go through school without paying for it?
Well,
and then from there we went to Vegas.
And what was his commissioning source? He was a pilot.
He had been ROTC. He went to school in Boston.
And what was his thought about the academies? Was he?
Oh yeah, he was super psyched.
Super psyched.
Yeah. He had a number of friends because we were still far enough back that a number of people who were higher up in the Air Force had gone through West Point.
Right.
And this is part of my story the whole time at the academy and even post grad was that I had an angel on my shoulder, right? Colonel Capps, who was the head of the English department. So when he left Vegas, we got stationed in England at Upper Heyford. And my one, besides my best friend, who then went to become the class of 85 guy, my one other contact was Carolyn Spalding, because she played tennis at London Central. And so I played tennis against her.
She did?
She was a year, yeah. So she was a year behind me. She was class of 82, whereas I was class of 81 because I went to prep school and she didn't. But yeah, so it's just one of those really weird, passing in time type thing.
This is your time in the sun, but what took Carolyn over there? That's interesting. I didn't know that about her.
Well, I assume, so London Central was a bit of a different school, right?
Yeah.
It was mostly people who were, they were staying in dorms. Their parents were stationed somewhere else or something like that. I don't know why she was at London Central. ASL, American School of London, was for all the ambassadors' kids and things like that.
Sure.
And the other schools were all Air Force bases, High Wycombe and Lake and Heath. And,
yeah, right.
Places.
We'll have to get her on here and ask her the story about why she was playing tennis against you.
Well, I think she obviously was better at it because I think she went on to become be a member of the West Point tennis team, and I did not.
So back then, were you big on academics? But obviously, the three S's, scouting was an important piece.
Yeah.
Eagle Scouts are like one of the Eagle Scouts and Boys and Girls States are two like major contributors to being attracted to the academy. I just found that out years later.
Yeah, and I was surprised when I got there and they told we're all sitting there plebe year and they're telling us how many of us were Eagle Scouts and things like that. I was like, wow, that's something.
Thank God,
but yes,
Boys State, because I didn't have much else.
California, man, it's so funny because when I got out of the Army, my first place I went was Huntington Beach, and I swore I would never leave. I was like, I found it. This is it. This is home. But I digress.
You grew up all over though as an Air Force brat.
I did. Yeah. It was every 3 years we moved.
And what was you played tennis in high school? Did you have other sports, or what was your?
I did. Yeah. So I played football. I wrestled. I played baseball. Like I said, it was sports year round.
Yeah.
Just and I suppose it was my junior year when my dad started pushing, hey, if you're going to go to West Point, you got to start this process. And the sporting thing really had as much to do with just social as love of just getting out and being athletic.
Yeah.
But with regards to the gaming, Um, so like every little kid living in the States in the 70s, right? I had plastic army men and thought that was cool. But when I got to England, England had a very refined sense of history, right?
Yep.
And everywhere I went or looked, there was military history, and so it just the hook was set. And I got very, very into military history, and the natural, I think, progression from that was gaming. Um, and that
So you started. So did you start in England, or did that just get you? Did you go to the little
my,
clubs and things
my
like
mother had actually bought me a game, one of those Avalon Hill games, one of your previous people were talking about
that? Yeah.
when I was younger, and I didn't really, I never really read the rules, so I saw these cardboard pieces and didn't know what to do with it. But when I got to England, over there they have gaming clubs.
Yeah.
Every village has gaming clubs, right? And so it wasn't hard to find guys who kind of taught me and said, "Hey, here's the rule book. Read this," and that just exploded, And so
And really,
and
once you learn the first one, everything else is kind of derivative of that. Just getting that
that's
first
correct.
one going. Yeah. That's so
Um,
interesting. And you keep it up to this day?
No, no. I still have the huge collection I built back then. It's sitting in a closet, but no, I don't. But the forums you may have seen me on, there was a period of time, and this is where I made the comment about Mike Reed, because when I was in SoCal, I bumped into him, where we were doing miniature gaming.
Yeah.
Um, and although I don't game anymore, I really got into the painting,
Yeah.
and have gotten to a level now where I do it. It's a side gig, but it's professional. And
Yep.
so I'll post things.
Well,
I've
good
got
for
about
you.
25 customers. Every customer I've got except for one is over in the UK. Um,
Oh,
and
so you painted for you were paid to do it for people.
yes, yeah,
Good for
that's what I
you.
do.
Well, you got
Yeah,
skills. That's great.
well, it's 40 years of trying. We got there. Yeah.
And so, why the prep school? What was that journey in terms of getting to the academy? Because obviously, you took a stop at the prep school.
And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, I don't know why. Well, I guess that my academic accomplishments were not as good as my friends, and my athletic accomplishments weren't not as good as my friends. So he got in, I did not. And I remember very distinctly, I was out at practice somewhere, and my coach and my father came to me, and they were very excited. Hey! You got into the prep school. I'm like, what the hell is the prep school? Well, it's the
Right.
West Point Prep School. And my response is, well, I didn't get into West Point. No, well then screw them. I'll go to BU. And my father's like, no, you won't. You will go to the prep school. If you don't like it, you don't have to go beyond it, but you're going to give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah.
And impressing him was very important to me at that time. And my coach was saying the same thing. You really don't want to pass this up. And so, and one of the great funnies I tell, because Peter Feeney is a good friend of mine,
Right.
and he's very, very close to Scott Barrington. They served together in the 82nd. And whenever we bump into each other at reunions and whatnot, I always remind him that Scott Barrington was my very first ever company commander, because he was my company commander at prep school.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Um,
Well, those of us who didn't go to the prep school really appreciated those of you who did, because it was usually Judd Bass was a prep school guy,
yep.
and he ended up bailing us out of a lot of trouble, both for his plebe mates, and then he was in my upper class company. So the prepsters, you prepsters, you just had a little bit more savvy about how things work. So.
Well, and ironically, we came up there thinking we were going to turn this place on its ear. We're going to show these guys what's what, right? And that was quickly dispensed with, but
Yeah.
yeah, there were certainly advantages, right? Having knowing how to make a bed, and knowing how to shine your brass.
Those little things would certainly help you out.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
so we talked a little about plebe year and in upper class. What was your course of study? You were interested in military history as a kid, but what was your course of study at the academy?
So, when we were going into yearling year, and they were talking to us about foreign languages, I remember very distinctly. They said, "Okay, we offer these 6 languages, or maybe it was 7, I forget. If you take French, Spanish, or German, we're going to assume that you had them in high school, and you'll be starting at level 4. If you take Russian, Chinese, Arabic, we'll assume you haven't had it, and you'll start at level 1.
Huh.
Well, having taken Spanish in high school and not done well, I said, well, I got to do something else. So I picked Arabic, and I really liked it. I really did. I mean, I did 3 semesters of it, and I signed up for the fourth semester, and I went into class, and I think it was like a week period, a 1 week period where we could drop a class or make changes. And I went into that class, and it was reading newspapers in Arabic. And I'm like,
Huh.
yeah, I'm out. So guys like Steve DeRoche and those guys who kept up with it. But
Yeah. DeRoche still
so
well, makes a living out of it. So apparently
initially, my thought was Arabic,
that's
and then I thought, well, then I'll do international economics. That sounds interesting. No.
no.
And as the time was coming to an end, I had to declare a major. I just said, well, I know that military history is a passion of mine.
Yeah.
And, from the time I interviewed with Colonel Capps, as a senior in high school, I'd said, I want to come teach military history here. And so I was like, well, that makes sense. That's what I'll do. I'll do military history. And so that became my course of study. And our class, I think, was the first class that was allowed to have a major outside of, engineering discipline.
Right.
So I majored in military history, which meant that I had to take a senior thesis, and that was interesting.
And what area interested you when you were there?
Yeah, I was very heavily focused in 18th century Europe, and particular passion for Napoleonic Wars.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, that certainly gave you good grounding for the painting.
That's right. Exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly the area I spent most of my time painting.
Lancers. I know how to do that. I studied that. Good for you.
Yeah.
And talk about your branch choice. What was it? Most people talk about hitting their head at Fort Knox, but what was your experience?
So I in that era, I suffered, and probably for years after, from being way too trusting, right? And someone said something to me, well, then it had to be truth. That was it. So armor was all I thought about, the idea of cav. And what I came to realize was that I was not going to rank high enough to get a cav spot, although I could go armor. And so I was like, well, then I don't want to go armor. It didn't occur to me, and I didn't bother to ask questions to find out, well, you could do armor one rotation and then work your way over the cav after that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. So I might change my mind, but I didn't. So I'm like, well, I can't go cav. I don't want to do it. So then it's a matter of, okay, quickly, Chris, you got to make a decision. Now having had a passion, particularly about Napoleon, artillery was an easy kind of, step. And there was an NCO who I got to talking to who gave me two pieces of bad advice. One was, he said, in the artillery, our motto is, if you can't truck it, F it. And I was like, well, that sounds good. I don't like to walk. And so I chose artillery. And then he said, the best kept secret in the Army is TRADOC, because after one rotation, it's considered a hardship tour, and you can go anywhere in the world you want. So when we're standing up doing branches and guys are picking, Bamberg, Germany, or Hamburg, or, I stood up and said, TRADOC, Fort Sill. And everyone's like, what? And I'm thinking, I got a secret you don't know. Well, as it turns out, the hardship tour is only for drill sergeants, not for officers,
In a universe of bad advice, you might have got a real ringer on that one.
But as it turns out, again, going back to the angel on my shoulder, so I called my father. My father called friends. It worked its way up, came back down, and I got moved across the street to 3-Corps Artillery and got into an 8-inch battery. And that was, I had an amazing time doing that.
Yeah.
So,
okay, good. So it worked
out. As I look back, I swear that my whole path associated with West Point is not the things I've done or the places I've been. It's the people that that have influenced my life again and again and again. That kind of defines my association with the academy.
Now, you mentioned Colonel Capps. Was there any other officers or teachers or professors that kind of had an outsized impact on you?
Well, Captain Butts threatened to get me kicked out if I failed one more English paper. But again, right? This was plebe year. I came back from class, and I'm apoplectic, and my roommate said, well, we got to do something about this. It didn't occur to me we could do something about it, So he goes to the company athletic sergeant, who's a cow, he then goes to the TAC. Boom, 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 boom. It gets elevated up to Colonel Capps, who's head of the English department. Comes back down, and Captain Butts. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I said I don't know what my final grade was. I suspect it was a D. I did know STAP, and as I was a senior and I look back, I recognized that a lot of the guys who had gone to STAP to improve their grades probably did themselves a favor, but also I heard nothing but great stories, about all the fun they had those summers. So I thought, I may have missed an opportunity there.
If you've had a chance
I
to
had
hear
my
some
share
of the
of these.
stories here, everybody who did STAP generally comes down and says, I learned how to study, or it actually helped, right? Because it's a focused time. I didn't get a chance to enjoy it myself, but not through any merit on my part. I think I squeaked through just enough.
Yeah.
What did you do to keep yourself occupied? What did you do for fun? Were you a murals guy? Did you go off post a lot? I know the B4 irreverent folks.
We were irreverent, so as an example.
Hijinks with deuce and a half would be one of the things, I guess.
September 8th, 18th, 1983 was a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Rich Hatch and I both marked our cards unmarked. He had his girlfriend pick us up, and we went to Newport to watch the America's Cup. And we were back in time for call the quarters. And Sundays nobody was checking, so we escaped that one. B4 was renowned for its athletics.
Mm-hmm.
Our first year, we finished first in the Corps in athletics and 34th in the Corps academically. And somehow
you knew your niche.
That's right. Somehow we took great pride in that, right?
You knew the plebes from B4 were actually tight as well, so that's a good company. That's good.
Yeah, it was. Well, but again, it was not hard. Their plebe year. We so many stories. The deuce and a half. But like you can recall, I'm sure you saw it, but it was common occurrence on someone's birthday to see them tied spread eagle to a laundry rack and rolled out into the area and left. And plebes would run out and take pictures or throw water on them or whatever it was.
Yeah.
In B4, our tradition was nothing like that. Your classmates would show up at your room and call the quarters. You would be held down and derobed, and then using edge dressing, which is alcohol-based, your age was painted on your fourth point of contact. And this was great hilarity because, of course, we all took communal showers with other companies. And so there would be somebody in there with a big black 2-0 or whatever.
And all of you were very glad when you went from 19 to 2-0 just based on the physics of that.
Well, I was very fortunate my birthday was in July. I never actually had to, had to deal with that. There's one story that I have to tell. It's part of B4 lore. So John Bacot, who sadly passed a year ago, but JB was a great prankster in B4. Really. And so on his birthday, he made a point all day long, this is first year, of ribbing us. No way, there's no way you're going to get me, no way, I got a plan, no way. All day long, he's ribbing us. He's just building people up to a frenzy. So picture, if you will, Sonny Sloan looking down North area after dinner. First class light goes on, and one sole figure goes racing out of the building, followed by a cloud of his classmates. Up the stairs, up to the fifth floor.
Yeah.
Now, his room was at the far end.
Yeah.
And so it was narrow. And so he lined everything up. So as soon as he got in there, he swung his bed around between the door and the chest of drawers against the wall. And we were not going to get in. There was just no way. We had giants like Lloyd Walker, bracing his feet against the opposite wall and pushing with all his weight. And the door was buckling, but it wasn't going to give.
Yeah.
It became siege warfare. We were taking dustpans and putting them at an angle at the bottom of his door and pouring trash cans of water under the door to try and inspire him to let us in. And all he was doing was cramming towels in there, right? The ribbing going on, the yelling and screaming. And poor Joe Martin has a PR the next day, and he can't get into the room to study. And he's screaming, "Let me in, let me in." And JB's like, "Not till taps, man. Nope, taps is the taps. You guys can't get me." So Pat Kilroy takes all the plebes up to the 6th floor, lashes them together, and rappels out the window. And all you hear is, no, get out. You know?
That's a great Pat Kilroy story, right? I know Pat. Yeah, Pat well. Yeah, that's great. I can just picture it. That's brilliant. Fantastic.
Pat was my roommate second semester, first year. First semester, first year, one of our classmates, Ray Lipscomb, had a pet squirrel.
Yeah.
It was named Gizmo, but he kept in a shoebox in his closet. Second semester, first year, I break up with my girlfriend like 6 weeks before graduation. So now I've got no one to take to graduation dance, lips in the soup. And I'm at the mall with Joe Martin just wasting a Sunday. And we pass a pet store, and I'm like, I'm buying a dog. Right. So I did some thinking, right? I thought to myself, well, as an officer, I can't have a big dog because I'm going to be out. So I need a small dog. So I got a little Lhasa Apso puppy who was just a little ball of fur at the time. And I brought him back. What am I going to do with him? And so we kept him in our room for the last 6 weeks of school.
Really?
Yeah. And when I went to class, he would go into the laundry bag and just sleep. And Pat Kilroy, who had grown up around animals, taught him how to use the bathroom on the New York Times. And we had a couple plebes who were in on it. And so they would give us a heads up if there was an officer coming, in which case he'd just go back in the laundry bag because he was so small he could yip, but he really couldn't bark. And pretty much when I threw him in the laundry bag, he'd just sleep. But this was
that's amazing, and you got away with it.
Got away with it.
Good for you.
It was a great company.
And how did that dog,
we have a 4-star general from our company, and we got a bunch of degenerates.
He went on to become a lieutenant. How did that dog do?
He was great
for many years?
Yeah, he was my dog. I had him for even after we got out, but it was one of those moments, right? Because I probably could have, the way we were packing and moving, and particularly as the officers, it was very laissez-faire. I probably could have smuggled him over with me when we went to Iraq.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And, again, angel on my shoulder, I'm so glad I didn't, because when we got over there, we were 3 Corps didn't deploy, but 3 Corps artillery did. And we became the heavy artillery for 18 Corps.
Yep.
So we were way on the left flank. And one of the things that a lot of the troops did was adopt stray dogs.
Right.
So by the time we got back to Dhahran, it's time to start loading up, and these guys have been with these dogs for 6-7 months, and they want to bring them home. It's like, absolutely not.
Yep.
And so a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of dogs that had gotten very used to eating MREs, suddenly finding themselves without again. So if I had, God forbid, I couldn't have brought him back.
Yeah. So you switched to the 8-inch after you graduated. You switched to the 8-inch battalion, I guess. Part of 3 Corps, and talk about the roles you had there. Fire support officer was in there somewhere, I imagine. If I know my friends, no. Tell me about that.
Well, we were a core asset, right? So we really didn't do that. We were a new design at the time. It was called the split battery. So it had, rather than having a 6-gun battery, it had 2 4-gun platoons.
Okay.
So each platoon had a fire direction center. So normally most batteries have 1 fire direction officer. We had 2. Most batteries have 1 platoon leader / XO. We had 2. And so I started out as a fire direction officer and did that, and then moved to another battery and became platoon leader, and then XO. And then I was in the S2 shop, and 8-inch, of course, was special weapons. We had the capability of firing nuclear weapons.
Right.
That was criminal, because what you would do is you would pull 1 gun out of line and take them to a spot many, many kilometers away from the battery. You would load it, give it the max charge, charge 7 powder. And then we had a 100-foot lanyard that we would attach to the gun. and go get in the Humvee, or worse, the Gamma Goat, pointing the other direction, and go as fast as you could. And as you're going, you pull that lanyard, and you hope that you outrun the blast radius, because the gun, I mean, it was only going to shoot like 20 kilometers, so that gun was going to be absorbed. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Not terribly well thought out, and so it was appropriate that the Army eventually, put the 8-inch to bed and got rid of.
Aside that the tactical nuclear doctrine wasn't so bad after all.
That's right.
I never knew that. Yeah. God bless the Army. Just drive, see if you can get out of the blast radius. But if you can't, well, there's always VA disability.
Yeah. So I was in the S2 shop, and then Desert Storm happened.
Yeah.
And all the officers over at the FA school it was like everyone had to grab their opportunity to get a combat patch.
Right.
And so we got an avalanche of officers applying to join the battalion in some form or another. We had, I think we had like 6 S3 and 5 assistant S3s, and just ridiculous numbers of officers attached to the battalion. And so I was pushed back down and became Battery XO.
Okay. Good for you. You got all the movement stuff to do.
Yeah. And that was, that was fun. Yeah.
That was when our group was doing a lot of that, because we'd done our time as platoon leaders and everything, and then we were XOs. And I was in S4 when I went over there. So imagine that. Good stuff. So I was in the 18th Airborne Corps with the 24th. So you were right. You were part of our group.
Yep, totally. I mean, and one of those funny stories, when we were all, doing our branch selection, and Peter Feeney and I are giving each other grief, and he's like, I'm going F3 bumper, you're a weakling. And like, one day you're going to be on a hill. You're going to want me to fire for you.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, out of nowhere, we're out in the desert, and I'm walking into 18 Airborne headquarters, and Peter's walking out. Those kind of crossings, made the stay over there much more bearable.
Yeah.
We only spent 20 minutes talking and catching up, but it lasted me days thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, any excitement over there? What was it like as the XO? Were you? Would you?
Yeah. So
the guns and all the rest, and keeping them supplied.
Well, that was largely, again, as a core asset. It wasn't something I really had to do. So pretty much, I just took one of the platoons. The battery commander kind of sat over the other.
Okay.
The combat experience was very minimal. We had one time where incoming rounds came in, where the Iraqis tried to shoot at us.
Right.
They were. I mean, we're in the desert, so you could see it coming or hitting, but it was 1,000 meters away. It wasn't. There's no fragmentation getting to us or anything like that. But battalion commander, really got to burr up his backside over that, and so he brought the battalion in tight, and we did a battalion 3, which meant that we had 24 guns, each of which shot 3 rounds at this one Iraqi battery. And we happened to cross by where we didn't have GPS in those days. We had one GPS Humvee for the battalion,
right.
So I didn't know for sure. Had a pretty good sense that when we passed it, it was something we'd hit, because it was just the kill radius of the 8-inch was like 80 meters. So you fire 24 of those, and so there wasn't much left. We drove past it, and so that's probably what we hit.
American counter battery fire.
That's right.
Fire one series of rounds at us that's coming back at you.
After that, it was the stereotype. The first day we came across POWs, and everyone's very excited about that. And we're going through the whole POW thing, and taking their documents and things like that, and getting ready to pass them back to the MPs. And by day 3, like everyone else, we're driving past them and throwing them MREs and say, keep walking. The MPs will pick you up. Because it was a mad race, right? The 82nd and the 101st were. The friggin' 101st was flying helicopters, faster than we could move, and so there was a demand, keep up, because there was a fear of the Republican Guard, turning west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The long drive. Good for you, though. So you got the combat patch, and then what? Coming back from that, what was it like being in the artillery? We all have stories of kind of the drawdown and the crazy environment after that. What was it?
I never experienced the drawdown, right? I did 5+. I got out in September of '91. No one was saying to me, "Hey, we'll pay you money to get out."
Yeah, yeah.
Now, while I was over there, our classmate Tommy Anderson,
Mm-hmm.
who had been in my battalion, and he took a job as a general's aide before this all went on, so he didn't get deployed, whereas we did. So he and his wife were sending me care sending and they're having their friends send me care packages, and we had all the battalion commander we had was an Aggie, was an A&M grad who proclaimed he hated West Pointers, but he went to great length to get as many West Pointers in the battalion as he could.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and he was a good man. So Tommy's writing me and telling me about how much fun he's having doing this thing called medical sales. I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
And so when I got back and I got hooked up with that recruiter, Cameron Brooks,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want to do? I think I want to do medical sales. I don't know what it is, but sounds better than being a teacher.
Yeah.
That kind of set the course for the next 30 odd years.
Which city did you do your Cameron Brooks meat market event in? Because they had those where they brought us all in there and lined us all up, and I did mine in Atlanta.
So did I, actually.
We were probably we were probably 5 slots over from each other.
Right, again.
Right. we, we were always we were always 20 feet away from each other. It wasn't until right now we got together. Yeah, no, I did that. The Cameron Brooks, the pharmaceutical sales was just taking off, and they really liked former military officers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and then the company that hired us, they took 5 JMOs. 3 of us were grads. They put us through training in Fall River, Massachusetts, and the guy who hired us was a JMO as well. And so he was thinking, well, it's like the Army. They wouldn't tell us where any of us were going to be posted until we finished training. And so my first posting was Huntington Beach.
Really?
I still remember. Yeah, I still
that
remember.
Worked out. There's that Angel again.
That's right. And
you really should rent that Angel out. That's be a good revenue stream for you. That's a pretty good one.
Looking out of the window, like the 10th floor, looking towards the beach, and the sun is setting, and the palm trees, and you got one airline coming into John Wayne Airport, and just thinking, I've arrived. This is it. I'll never leave.
That's not so bad. Well, that worked out for you.
That did. That was
family, and when did you start getting that ramped up in terms of that side of the?
When I was in Lawton, Oklahoma, there were 3 of us post Iraq that hung around together. It was me, Rick Lang, and Johnny Collison. All right, and we all got it out about the same time. Rick went to film school at NYU. Johnny wanted to go in the Peace Corps, and I figured, well, God bless you, man. I'll never see you again. I'll read something about your head being found on a stake somewhere in Bora Bora or something, right?
It'll make for an interesting story anyway.
That's right. Yeah. Go with God, man. I hope it turns out.
I'll be at Huntington Beach.
But one day, I'm walking to meet my manager at the Holiday Inn off La Paz, and Johnny's walking out. And I'm like, oh, so this is clearly, the Angel, this is clearly meant to be. We got to get a place together. At the time, I'd been living like in Aliso Viejo, and we're like, oh no, we got to go to the water, right? So we got a house in Huntington Beach, and that began the journey. So over time, we just kept adding people, right? So we started banging on Rick Lang. Hey man, if you're going to do film, you got to come out here,
right?
And then an 87 grad who actually been in B4 with us, he landed out in Huntington Beach area, and we're like, well, yeah, you can live with us. And then one day Johnny says, I got this friend who lost their roommate. You can tell as he's saying this, he's being very generic.
Right.
And if we add this 4th person, we can get a house right on the water, hot tub. I mean, it's going to be amazing. I'm like, yeah, cool, no worries. It sounds great.
Yeah.
And then he introduced his friend, this friend of his, Cheryl. And he said, only rule, no dating the roommate. Like, okay, no problem, man. Good. 6 months later, Cheryl and I are arguing over who's going to tell Johnny, that rule has been broken.
You violated the rule.
Violated the rule. I've been with her ever since. So she grew up in California.
Okay.
Literally when the opportunity came to come here, and I told her about it, she was mortified because in her mind, every Texan lived in a trailer and watched Family Feud. Um, she's so Californian. Um,
I grew up in
um,
California, so I understand her perspective.
yeah. Um, and
So she's a Southern
um,
California girl.
right,
So
right.
talk a little about
Um,
family, kids. What's the? How did you guys turn up doing that?
yep. So we have twin daughters,
Okay.
um, and they are both in their senior year in college now. Um, One took a soccer scholarship to Virginia, and the other one is down at A&M.
Okay.
Um,
There you go.
yeah,
What's it like raising twins?
it's the easiest thing in the
Is
world.
that right?
Yeah, because I told her, if we'd had only one, it'd have been easy for me to do what my father had done. Here, you take care of it, you change the diaper, you manage the crying, right? But with two, that was impossible. So I had to get involved, which I'm eternally grateful for.
I had never thought of it that way. That's an interesting point, right?
And then the other thing was they were perpetually with a friend,
Right.
right? So they weren't tugging on mommy and daddy, entertain me, I'm bored, right? They always had a friend. They were, they truly do craft their own language and, learn to communicate with each other and have inside jokes about mommy and daddy. And, the stories they tell me now about the things they did, that I had no idea of,
Are
make
they
for great fun.
identical, or were they just fraternal?
No, they were fraternal. Personality wise, they couldn't be more different. But they are very, very
Okay.
close. They weren't always, but just like my brother and I tried to kill each other, they went through that stage and then grew very tight.
Seniors in college, though. That's a. We'll talk next year. It's an interesting shift. When my son went, I only have one son. So when he went from graduating college, there's something about that is interesting that you will experience within the year. So
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think a lot of us have lost parents. I haven't yet, but I look at my father and I'm watching his decline and thinking about, the impact that'll have. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so as each of these, kind of life. It's so funny, Paul, when I think about it. I mean, we used to laugh. Danny and I would laugh when we would go back. I mean, the last reunion we went to, I want to say was 25. And back then, we could still walk in the barracks,
Yeah.
right? We just walked in the barracks and walked up to B Ford, bang, bang, bang on someone's door and walked in. We thought that would be funny. The cadets were not amused at
Oh,
all.
I didn't think that was funny at all.
Now you
I have a
can't
little
do
different
that.
attitude about it now. You don't.
Yeah.
They don't welcome me going up and banging on doors and say, "Hey, let me tell you about the time I made a clean getaway in my deuce and a half."
That's right. um, you know, um, but we were laughing back then at 25. And, man, we are old grads, and like
Yeah.
now you think about we are old grads. So it again it proves the lies get bigger and the tall tales get taller as we get together and tell stories.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And now I did get a chance to look at your LinkedIn. You stayed in healthcare of different types, though, different technology companies. What's the draw
Yeah.
there?
Well, I mean, so the I guess I've never worked in an office. Well, that's not true. I had one stint with the last startup I did where we would go back to the home office and work in the office, but otherwise I've been remote my whole life, working from home. So that's a very, very nice feature. Um, Healthcare companies tend to be lucrative,
Sure.
so that's a nice feature. I get um, I get to travel a fair amount, which of course creates opportunity to pile up points and things like that. So our family trips to Europe have all been paid for with hotel points and airline points,
Yeah.
American Express points, and so there's that feature. And then lastly, when I first started it, it was kind of heady, and now it's gotten to a place where I'm leading managers, and it's I don't want to. Rewarding is so cliche, but it's a good feeling, right? When you give somebody a piece of advice that you get that tingle down your spine, that is that was good.
Yeah.
That was a good one. Right?
Well, your pattern, you see the patterns, and when you share what is obvious to you from all your experience, the smart ones will take on board that they're getting a good piece of advice, right?
Right. Yeah.
Not like the NCO that gave you the advice about going to TRADOC.
But I had great NCOs in my unit.
Because his patterns were something limited because that was just for NCOs. Thanks, Sergeant.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if he didn't know or if he was just laughing when he got home that night about this poor dumb cadet, signed up for TRADOC.
I think you just invented a new element of the podcast. And that's what's the worst advice you've ever gotten. Because we all try to talk about how wonderful things. No, we've gotten some really bad advice.
I did. Yeah, I did.
So
in my younger days, I was very susceptible to those things.
I tell you.
So
you're still banging along. You're a regional business director.
Yep.
What? You're 61 because you're a year older with the prep school stop. What's still enjoying it? You're gonna keep after it for a while, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, very much enjoying it. And both my daughters are pursuing routes into healthcare, and it's really funny because the space I'm in right now is microbiology, and coincidentally, they're both in the middle of either microbiology course or microbiology lab.
Okay.
And it's a lot of fun listening to them argue with each other about microbiology, and they both know infinitely more than I do. But I'm hearing things and like, oh yeah, I know that. Oh yeah, and it's so I enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah, good.
But it just like I said, it affords me really great flexibility, right? I'm responsible for a quarter of the country, and so when I travel, when I travel to Florida, I'm going to connect with Danny, type thing, and so that's just good. It's a nice side benefit, yeah.
And what? Obviously, if the daughters are seniors in college, they haven't started their own families yet, so you got that whole chapter coming up. What do you do? What do you do for fun? You a golfer?
I am not a golfer.
Yeah.
Right. So during the pandemic, I took up cooking.
Oh.
And have very much immersed myself in that.
Good for you.
And particularly, so our last 3 trips have been to Spain, Italy, then Spain, then Greece. And so in each time, talking to them, to the people who bring us food, learning that, and then bringing spices home and experimenting with those. It's gotten to the place now where our family gatherings, we have a pretty large family in the Texas area, between my sister and their whole brood, my father and my stepmother, and they've both since divorced and remarried, and so they've got their brood. So when we get together, there's usually about 20 of us, and my brother-in-law is Italian. He likes to cook, and so he and I are always responsible either for the main entree, or the appetizers and desserts and things like that. And so it's something I enjoy a lot.
Good for you. I also crossed that Rubicon around COVID, just learning how to make basic stuff. And when it clicked, it clicked.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad to have done it. So good for you.
Well, it's that artistic outlet, right? I mean, I don't paint as much as I used to, in no small part because I enjoy cooking. And a lot of stuff I'll cook, and it's an experiment, and we'll try it, and we never ever finish it. And so the dogs
I think people who don't understand some of the basics feel that it's drudgery, but in actuality, it's one of the most creative things you can do. There's just so much. It's so playful to do. My wife and I both really experiment with stuff and have a lot of fun. And we make a lot of terrible things in our experimentation, but we have a lot of fun with it. So good for you, though. That's great.
That's exactly right. Like I said, we try it, and lesson learned.
Did you have a nickname at the academy?
I did.
What was it?
Our company was renowned for its nicknames.
Okay.
Charlie Moses, as an example, was Mom because of his proclivity for carrying people on his shoulders back from my call. Chris Greer was Bonehead.
Mm-hmm.
We were never sure if that was because of he did boneheaded things or always kept his hair very close. Tom McCann was Shoe. Poor Kathy was Squeaks, etc. My nickname was Dirty.
Dirty.
That's
a great nickname.
It was a fun nickname. And it came my cow year. Because prior to that, I was just Bumper.
You got your nickname your cow year.
Yeah. Well, I was Bumper prior to that, right? Everyone knew me as Bumper. But this was something that the company did. It was almost like Animal House. Your Theta Cow name is, right? And we had a hockey player in our company named Dan Sullivan, who I guess was not terribly good at hockey, but was fearsome. And so his nickname was Dirty Sully. And they said, Bumper is just a second-class Sully. Right? And so it became Dirty Bumper.
But that, you know what, though? That's why B4 is special. And you got to get props to a group that deserves it. Is you have reunions, you have Zoom calls, and you distinguish yourself with nickname giving. Yeah. The rest of us,
we did. Who knows what it's like now? But yeah.
If your name was Smith, you were called Smitty. Well, that takes zero. This is one of my little side projects. But Dirty Bumper, I like that.
I was banging on Terry Finley for years. You got to name one of your horses Dirty Bumper. You got to name one Dirty Bumper. Yeah. He never did.
Yeah, well, he's got quite an expensive operation to take there, and he was going to take in the dish for that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's fantastic, Chris. What a pleasure catching up tonight, and what a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
I so enjoyed it. I'm so glad. And like I said, I put the challenge out. So B4 is responsible for 4 more people. So you should probably expect people reaching out on that.
I look forward to having them on.
Enjoyed it, man. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe button. With over 900 living graduates, we have a lot of stories to tell, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.